welcome back everybody to the Phantom Zone. It is the most earth-breaking, ground-shaking, but never media show money-taking, the man, the myth, the legend, the most electrifying villain in all of YouTube entertainment today, General Zod. And today, I'm going to do something different I don't normally do. I normally do not take requests. It's just not my thing, because people ask me to watch really terrible things because they want to see me get upset about it. And believe it or not, I don't like to be angry. I like to be a happy villain. But occasionally, I'll watch something thinking it's going to be good and get extraordinarily pissed off by the end of it. But this one was a little bit different. It had been on my list of things to watch for a while, and there was somebody who was curious about the response. So unlike most videos, I'm going to give a shout out to someone who was a coworker of mine that I worked with. Abby, this video is for you if you're watching this during the playback. Here are my thoughts on this movie, because oh boy, I got a lot of them. This movie is called The Mad God, and it is by Phil Tippett. Phil Tippett is a very interesting director. He has worked on various projects and has done a lot of different films. He did the work for Jurassic Park, things like that, a bunch of other different movies. Phil is known throughout the industry for doing some great work as far as animatronics and bringing things to life and stuff like that. He's never produced anything, but being a co-producer, co-writer on certain things. He's a very behind-the-scenes guy, but apparently he has had a vision of something he's wanted to do. This is about 30 years into the making, and that's a long time. So before I get started with this, unlike most reviews, this is going to be broken down into two separate reviews. And by that, I mean my rating will be two different ratings. One for how the movie is in general, and then one for my personal preference. Because I feel like this movie is not a movie that falls into my standard reviewing system. And what I mean by that is this movie is very much an artist movie. And I know there's a lot of pretentious douchebag directors and movie writers who say, oh, this movie is art and nobody will understand it and blah, blah, blah. And what they conceive as art is crap. It's standard, generic crap. This movie is a little bit different in the sense that Phil never touted this as like the greatest thing ever. He's pretty much just come out and said this was a passion piece for him. It took him 30 years to make, and it shows it. So I have to rate this differently because of the fact that this movie is a movie made by an artist, I feel, for people who are heavily into the art of filmmaking in general, the processes of shooting, and things like that. And I'll probably get the most technical in this review that I've ever gotten in any other review, because this movie deserves to be reviewed on a very technical level, because it is a technical marvel. I'm not going to lie to you, there is not a shot or a scene in this movie that is not gorgeous. This uses stop motion animation, almost claymation kind of stuff as well, which in Hollywood history, there's only been very few movies to ever use this process, because this process is extraordinarily hard to shoot, film, and make. This movie is about 90 minutes, or I'm sorry, 83 minutes. So it's an hour and some change. But the painstaking amount of time this movie must have been to make, the amount of detail that's put into this movie is mind-boggling. Truly, there has not been a movie out like this that just off the technical skill alone is a 10 out of 10 by itself. Now, my issues are going to come later into this review, because before I get into my negatives, I want to kind of load the front end of positives, because there's going to be some people out there that be like, well, Zod, you just don't understand. This is a brilliant artistic movie, blah, blah, blah. And look, I understand. I get art. And for me, we probably won't ever get another movie like this, because this is a true artist movie. This is like a movie when the pretentious douchebags that come out and rate movies and go, oh, this is a work of art. This is the actor at the best. All that shit that Hollywood says. This is true art. This movie, from start to beginning, is visually the most stunning movie, the most weird and trippy movie that I think I've ever watched in 37 years of my life. That is not hyping it up, things like that. It is very astonishingly gorgeous, dark, eerie, and horrific all at once. And something needs to be said about that film. So let me give you a little bit of history. Phil Tippett had completed this in 2021, but he'd started years prior, 30 years prior. So you figure he started this in like the 90s and just finished it recently. And the plot centers around an assassin who is walking with a briefcase bomb to some place. And then from there, it descends into madness. And when I get into my plots, I'll get into spoilers, because I can't really tell you what my gripes is with this movie without giving some spoilers away. And I would honestly suggest going into it blind to form your own conclusions. Now, the production of this film. This is super important for me to go through, so you know the painstaking amount of detail and truly how very bold this project was. While working on RoboCop 2, yes, he did RoboCop 2, Phil began filming what would become Mad God. His work on Jurassic Park led him to believe the days of stop motion were over and the film was shelved. So, like I said, stop motion animation is one of the hardest things to do, and it's why it's not done, and it's really particularly hard to shoot. But 30 years later, with the encouragement of members of his studios, Phil began working on the project again, utilizing crews of volunteers to assist him. So on the weeks, I would get as many as 15 to 20 people coming around. They didn't all have the talent or skill, but I'd figured out the process during the week. I had them do all the heavy lifting. With the aid from a Kickstarter donations, Tippett was able to create the first 3 sections, which make up about half the film. Tippett released behind-the-scenes footage on YouTube during the production. In 2013, Academy Award-winning sound designer Richard Biggs agreed to do the sound design and mix the project, which I must say the mix and the sound was very, very good. And I'll get to that too. This currently holds a 91 on Rotten Tomatoes with 65 reviews, averaging a 7.8 out of 10. The consensus is a rich visual treat for film fans. Mad God proves that even in the age of CGI, the cinema allure of stop motion remains strong. So now to give you guys my own thoughts on this, because I needed to give you the history to understand exactly what kind of film this is. So for my positives, the sound design and the cinematography, the actual character designs, and the stop motion in general is gorgeous. It's so gorgeous that things that are meant to be creepy and disgusting are very much creepy and disgusting. The overall premise of the story, if you could call it that, is indeed a very interesting one. This journey that halfway through kind of takes a pivot, and then you go on another different kind of journey, which kind of link up to the overall message of what the film is trying to convey. which are very quickly deciphered. There'll be some people out there who will watch this and go, what the hell did I just watch for 83 minutes? I have no clue what's going on. And that's the thing that I also admire the most about this film. It's very much forces the audience to think, because there is no dialogue in this at all. There's grunts, there's things like that, there's sounds, but there's no dialogue to this film throughout its 83-minute runtime. And that's in both my good or bad categories, because it doesn't give the audience anything to kind of decipher, where I believe film audiences shouldn't be treated as stupid, because that's more infuriating to me. A film like this maybe asks the audience too much and to interpret too much for themselves. And I think that hurts the film when you have very weird and graphic imagery. It's hard for the audience to try to grab onto what the concept is, because they're so distracted by the beautiful scenery that it's set in. So it's both a good and a negative. And like I said, the musical score for this and the mixing is absolutely fantastic. Every song, every note, every sound goes with what the scene requires it to. Some things are downright horrifying, and some things are really gross and hard to look at. And I think that the music complements each section very well. The musical flow goes with the imagery and the stop motion. The stop motion animation in this is quite honestly staggering, and it makes me want to look up the videos, which I did before doing this review on YouTube, on how they designed and created things. It's a painstakingly aggravating process, and God bless all those people. And 15 to 20 volunteers did this with one man. Holy shit. This is true artistry. Like, this is an artist who cares about their craft. And I got the box office and everything, and with this movie, I have the feeling as if Phil didn't give a shit about what the critics had to say, or probably even how many people went to see this in the cinema. He wanted to make this movie, he wanted to do this thing, and he wanted it to bring it out there to the people. And I gotta respect something like that. Unfortunately, there is negatives here, and there's a few of them. Negative number 1. This has no dialogue, as I said. Now, normally, there needs to be dialogue because of the fact that when you do movies like this, either you have to have visuals that will strongly grasp people where they can decipher the concept, or you have to have people explaining shit so that people don't get lost. Unfortunately, the visuals are distracting because of the grotesque nature of this film and what the movie is centrally about. And the music is distracting too because of the fact that it's so damn good. This draws away from what the core of the story is. And I watched this with my girlfriend, and after we got done, I had to explain what the whole thing meant. And to be honest with you, it's a rough interpretation. I probably have to watch it again, but I wouldn't, because of the fact that it's a very tough watch to get through. There are certain scenes that are hovered on way too long. There's a particular scene with a crying baby mutant thing that's being kind of ushered along through this really long stairway shot, and all you hear is this mutant baby thing crying for about, I'd say, a good 10 minutes, and it is fucking annoying. And I normally don't get annoyed by these things, but even I had to be like, holy shit, can we move it along, because this scene drags out way too long. And I understand the significance of the scene, but the problem is some of these scenes are so lingered on for so long, it feels more indulgent than it does actual relevance to the movie. It feels like they could do the shot, they did the shot, it was an amazing shot, and he wanted to show you how fucking amazing the shot was. To me, it rides a fine line between being a creative work and an indulgent piece, and sometimes it indulges itself a little bit too much and is kind of almost narcissistic in a way, a bit. Like, the director knew he created something good, and he leans and he kind of he kind of swerves into those indulgences a little bit too much. And I use that word a lot because a lot of this does feel very indulgent, does feel very much like he didn't want to leave some things on the cutting wood floor. And unfortunately, with a movie like this, you have to cut shit out because at 83 minutes, this movie feels fucking long. And I'm not joking you, like, I paused it to see how much time was left because unfortunately the visuals are so good and graphic that you can only watch this shit for so long before it kind of does get to you. And this is a good or bad thing because it states how strong the visuals are, but no one wants to watch people being cut up and, you know, monsters shoveling shit and all of this grotesque shit for a solid hour. It's just too much access. And I'm a person who's watched The Thing and a bunch of other, like, you know, the Hostel movies, which one could say way indulge in gore and sadomasochistic type things and other adult content. But there's a break within those movies because they know if they hit you with nonstop violence, it kind of just gets boring after a while. And this is just honest criticism. It in no way means that I don't respect what's done. But unfortunately, when you make a film, you're subject to being critiqued. And for me, the film is very indulgent in a lot of different spots. And a lot of things could have been cut down. I'd almost say you could run this a little under an hour. The problem with that is to get a cinematic release, the runtime needs to break the hour mark. I don't think you really had to sacrifice much, but maybe cut and remove a couple of scenes here and there or shorten the length of some scenes here and there, and it would have been a much tighter experience. Now, story. Holy fuck, this thing has no discernible story except what you interpret out of it. Now, get the premise, and spoilers, if anybody wants to watch it, you know, click off this video, go watch it, come back to this section. Anyways, so the premise that I gleaned from it is an assassin goes down, they got this bomb. They're supposed to blow this thing up. Doesn't tell us what this thing does or what it is. And they get to where they're going. There's this map that deteriorates, which is probably like a symbol. Like every time he gets closer to the point they're supposed to go to, the map starts to break apart till they reach their destination. Then the person you've been following gets fucking killed. At this point, I was fucking baffled because you spend so long seeing these different horrific scenes that happen throughout this, in this mad world, right? You have no clue who's in charge, but then it brings in these scientists. They dissect this guy, and he's got all of this shit inside of him, but not organs, like jewels and things like that, and then they pull some kind of creature out of him. They bring it to this thing who goes down these stairs, which is the long scene that I told you about. These fucking stairs drag on forever. And this thing helps create this kind of dust that, what I gathered, creates new universes. And the bomb has significance because they flash to our world, which shows us using guns and bombs and stuff. So I took it as a sort of message about human nature and the violence within human nature. And that's all good. The problem is I had to fucking decipher this through visuals, which not most people have patience to do. There's no fucking dialogue. There is nobody telling you or even giving the audience a hint of what they should look at. And that is a problem because while I don't think people are stupid, people do need some kind of fucking indicator what they're supposed to watch. If you don't have road signs to what people should pay attention, people by nature are like squirrels with ADD. They'll just look all over the fucking place and they won't get the message. And I understand, if you're an artist or you're someone who gets in tune to certain aspects of things, you might pick up the same things I did. Or if you watch a hell of a lot of movies, you'll start to realize throughout the course of the movie what the director wants you to focus on because they'll focus certain shots, things like I picked up the briefcase and that was going to be a theme, and the other stuff was just background noise. And what the real message was is a story about creation. It was a story about these beings from this world that I'm gathering balances both violence and, you know, the opposite of violence, whatever that is, right? That, like, their universe is in harmony, but they create other universes that are out of this balance, and Earth is shown to be one of them, right? So it is a commentary on our current world, which, cool, it's done well. That shit's not shoved in your face. You really got to dig for it. The problem is you really have to dig for what the message of this movie is, because it's non-stop, violent, gory, sometimes downright disgusting visuals. And this is from a guy who's seen every disgusting type of horror movie you can. I watched Terrifier. I've watched tons of these movies with blood and guts, but this is different because it's such a really poignant statement. It never lets up. There's no break. There's no humor. There's no side characters. There's no other fucking characters. I had to sit here and try to decipher what the characters were I was supposed to be watching. So from a movie standpoint, this is a movie with no coherent narrative. Therefore, it's going to be hard for even an average person to find something out of this. And that's really the problem with creative films like this, is that the average person is not going to watch this and think that it's a creative masterpiece. They're going to click it off and go, what the fuck was I just suggested to watch for like 83 minutes? Like, what the fuck was that? And it's sad because this does have a message. This does have a theme. This does have some of the most beautiful visuals I've ever seen done in stop motion animation. This would be up there for me right by Nightmare Before Christmas, which I think hands down is the best stop motion claymation film ever fucking made. I will fight somebody for that. But the difference is, Nightmare Before Christmas knew to add dialogue and to make the story very clear and have music, and the music connected to what the story was. This is a very big, incoherent mess of scenes that, unless you're really watching. And I remember watching a thing with Phil explaining what the movie is supposed to be, and he even says you're supposed to interpret it in your own way. And Phil, that's great. I'm glad that there are still artists left who say, fuck Hollywood norm, you know, figure it out. That's cool. But Phil, you gotta give people fucking something. You can't just put a bunch of fucking things on screen and go, alright, here's the picture, good luck fuckers, go at it. That's not how fucking cinema works. I'm sorry. As an artistic piece, if you told me this was a picture like the Mona Lisa or in an art gallery, right? If you lined up all this film, just picture lining up this film as a bunch of fucking paintings and you had to decipher it, I'd be like, good for you. This is a fucking work of art. It should be in the Louvre or the Louvre or somewhere like that. That fucking French museum, okay? It should be there, right? So the world can see, like, and go, oh my god, the horrific man, this means this to me, right? But the problem is, this is not a fucking art gallery. This is a fucking film. You can't expect people to watch moving pictures for an hour with no fucking sound and decipher what the fuck you're trying to tell them in a movie. Like, I literally had to go back through to make sure what I gleaned from this was right, and then Phil appears, and God bless him, the man's been in Hollywood for 30 years, so I respect the hell out of all of his work, but he's just like, well, when I did this film, I wanted people to draw their own conclusions. This is just a, you know, passion piece of mine for 30 years. And it's like, Phil, I respect the hell out of you, and I respect this work, but Jesus Christ, people are stupid. Okay, they're not going to fucking sit here and try to figure out what the fuck you're saying in an 83-minute movie, Phil. That's not how this works. You got to give us fucking something. A piece of dialogue, something somewhere, a fucking neon sign. I don't know, a person reading a fucking book that explains the story, or those little fucking scroll things, right? Star Wars did it. Phil, just make a Star Wars B-roll. Something. Because at the end of this, I was exhausted. I was fucking exhausted and tired from watching this movie because I have never fucking in my life focused on something as hard as I did to catch what the meaning of this film was. Because for a while, I just thought it was a bunch of nasty shit in succession with no coherent point. Till I got to about the midway point of the film, and then I'm like, oh, it's a creationism kind of tale, mixed with some religious symbolism. I get it, Phil. I get your fucking message, but a vast majority of the people will not gravitate towards this movie. Some people will turn this off. I can guarantee you. You will suggest this to a friend of yours, and you might get what the meaning is, like I do, and you're like, I want the world to see how great of a fucking artistic film this is. And it is. It's a good artistic film. But you're going to suggest this to someone. They're going to turn it on for, I give about 20 minutes. They're going to click it off. They're going to call you back, and they're going to go, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why the fuck would you suggest I watch this fucking crazy-ass movie? Right? Because this does not appeal to the normal person. And this is that fine line between what constitutes as art and what constitutes as an actual good movie. And unfortunately, as a movie, this is not good. As an art project or an art piece, this is fucking brilliant. 10 out of 10. As a film, it just does not work because it does not follow the structure of a film. It has a beginning, middle, and end, but the story is so jumbled that you have to piece together what the whole entire track of a story is. See, even in an incoherent narrative, take Quentin Tarantino, he tells his stories out of order, but the ending of the film is always the fucking ending. The stuff in between pieces together how you got to the end point of the film. Take a movie like Pulp Fiction. That story is literally told out of order. The end of the film is essentially the beginning, right, of the diner scene. See, we start at the diner, we end at the diner, and all the shit in between narratively connects everything. So that by the time you get back to the diner, you go, oh, that's why Jules is there with a Hawaiian shirt on and flip-flops, right? You get to understand the characters. The problem is, there's one character we follow that gets killed. Then we follow another character to a whole different section of the world that I can't for the life of me remember what happens to them. I think they get killed too because something else gets harvested, right? So our main protagonists constantly get killed to create something else. And it's very narratively disjointing because it's cool to do a plot twist where the person you think that you're following is not actually that person, and you switch it over and then you're following that person. The problem is there's no fucking protagonist. There's no antagonist either. There's no good or bad guy in this. There is just shit happening and visuals. And that does not make for very good storytelling. Unfortunately, when you tell a story, especially in film, you are restricted by the rules, and you need a beginning, middle, and end. This movie is essentially a cycle of things happening. There is no beginning, middle, or end. It's a fucking circle. So when you get to the end of the film, it goes right back to the fucking beginning. And look, I know my friend's gonna watch this, and hopefully she got some laughs. I'm just being real, okay? It's a fucking circle. This movie is a fucking circle. Where you start at the beginning of the film is exactly where the fuck it ends at the end of the film. And I don't know how to feel about that aspect of it because there's nothing in between to make it really connective. Like, I've done films like that too. There's a movie called Donnie Darko. That whole premise of that movie essentially fucking starts you back at the beginning. And I've heard people say the same thing I'm saying now. That what the fuck was the point of the rest of the movie if the whole time, spoilers, he was gonna die? Why the fuck did I spend almost 2 hours with a crazy-ass rabbit and this thing? But it was about the theory of time travel. Time travel is circular. There was a reason for the movie looping back to the beginning. This movie is weird that the way it loops back, it's basically just a cycle of death, rebirth, creation kind of a thing. And I get it, but it's just not for me. And I have a feeling it would not be for most people. Now, would I recommend this to other people? Fuck no, not the normal people that I know that goes to watch movies like Thor and shit like that. But if you are an artist or someone interested in film and you want to see a masterclass of beautiful camera shots, gorgeous scenery, in a sense, there's a lot of torture and murder, but I mean just the way things are built, the way these claymation characters move, the art of it. Anybody who's an artist, I would strongly suggest watch this film. You might love it and respect the art of it. But if you're a movie person like myself, I'd say watch it once out of curiosity, but I can guarantee you won't ever watch it again. It's just too much, and there's no story. This is not like where I'll go, fuck yeah, the story in that really jazzed me up. I gotta throw on the Mad God again. It's just something I can only watch once and I'm done. I appreciated the experience. I respect the hell out of Phil Tepid. I think he's an amazing person. I think he should make a movie with a more coherent story in this style. I think we need more people like Phil to do something creative as hell, but he needs a story behind it. And that's my one big negative for this film. There is no story. There is no characters. There's no character development. Therefore, it's hard for me to care for the creatures and characters involved in this because I have no attachment to them. And that's just the God's honest truth. So, my final overall rating for this film. As I told you, I'm going to do 2 separate ratings. So, as a artistic piece, as people who will watch this and the visuals and the sound design, no doubt that it's solid 10. The sound, the visuals, the artistry behind it is gorgeous. But as a film and something I would recommend, I would have to give this about a 6 out of 10. I would say that it is, if you take out a story and a character, that drops a lot of points for me. And the fact that it is really hard to figure out what's going on, the fact that it requires the amount of attention that I don't think people possess anymore. This film limits your audience by about half already because of its subject matter. Now you cut that into another third or so by people who just will not have the patience for this movie. I think that it is a dying type of film being made that should be respected and definitely analyzed by people who want to get into the field. But for the average film watcher, I don't think they'll connect to this at all. For horror fans, they'll be confused. For people who just like sick stuff, I don't think they'll get the overall message of this. So it's got a very limited audience that are really going to gravitate to what this film is trying to say and what it's about. So I give the art a 10 out of 10, but the film itself a 6 out of 10. Hopefully, I've maybe enticed people to give it a try. I would still say watch it. You'll know within the first 20 minutes whether or not you're going to go through the rest of it. But I think there's a lot to admire. I think this man is very good at his craft. And you know what? I'm going to go a step further and say I hope that he makes another film, maybe a bit more of a coherent story. But if he puts a story behind this, a couple of dialogue, spoken words between characters, someone we can connect with, I think, quite honestly, he could make a masterpiece. But for me, this just isn't it. This will probably be the last time I'll ever watch this. But it doesn't mean that I don't respect the art and I don't respect the amount of time and the painstaking effort that it took to make this. I respect the hell out of this guy. I respect everybody who was involved, and good for him that he got to make the film he wanted to make. And I think it's a shame that more film directors don't get to do the vision they want to do. They don't make enough money to do something like this. Even with the money he's amassed, he had to do a Kickstarter. So I think Hollywood should encourage more of this kind of filmmaking. This is how masterpieces get made. It's just, this movie wasn't it for me. In the comments below, let me know, what did you think of Mad God? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you not know what the fuck was going on? What were your interpretation of the themes and all of that? Also, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, join the Prophets of Geek Culture on Mondays, Sundays, and Tuesdays. Said that backwards. I don't care, for Star Wars Sunday, Marvel Monday, DC Tuesday, and of course tonight at the witching hour, maybe, depending on my co-host, we will do late night talks. We'll talk about, media shenanigans, because Hollywood sucks. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and as always, remember the only rule here in the Phantom Zone: kneel before Zod.